but I don't miss the hangovers, and I kind of always took everything a little too far. I think, when I would drink a lot. I would just not stop until I physically couldn't drink anymore, or they just cut the liquors off somehow. And even if they did that, I'd find a way to find some liquor, you know what I mean? So it'd be hard for me to just take a couple drinks.
Hey, what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, which is brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians to talk about their lives, music, and craft beer. I hope you've been having a glorious week so far. We are approaching the end of Vox and Hops Sober February 2022. That is presented by Pitch Black North, the Satanic Tea Company. If you do not know who Pitch Black North is, let me tell you a little bit about them right now. Their slogan is "Sin now, steep forever." Every sip is blasphemy. All of their products are ethically sourced, expertly crafted, and are only made in small batches. They make specialty tea, but they also make coffee as well. One of my favorite products of theirs is the Devil's Blood English Breakfast. It's a devilishly delicious brew for those who enjoy a strong, simple tea, great on its own or with a splash of your preferred milk product. You can head on over to their website, pitchblacknorth.com. That's pitchblacknorth.com. And when you're checking out after picking up some amazing satanic teas, make sure to use the promo code VOX&HOPS15. That's VOXHOPS15, because then you'll save 15% off of your entire purchase. Not only will you be getting a bunch of sinfully delicious teas and coffees, but you will also be supporting the podcast, and that is something that I would truly appreciate. I'm super stoked to have Pitch Black North as the presenting sponsor of Vox and Hops Sober February 2022. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I would just like to ask you to follow the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast on the podcast platform of your choice. But more than that, I'm asking you to tell a friend about the podcast. If there's someone in your life that just loves metal, well, tell them that the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast exists. You could tell them that there are over 300 episodes for them to go back and discover, where I have conversations with some of the world's best metal musicians. If you were to encourage one of your friends to become a future Vox and Hops head, that would be something that I would truly appreciate. Now, today on the podcast, I'm with John Jarvis of Scour, Agoraphobic Nosebleed, All Will Fall, China Girl, Fulgora, Colton Wong City Nest, and a few more projects. Get ready, everyone. This is Vox and Hops, episode number 326.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Today I'm with John Jarvis of Scour, Agoraphobic Nosebleed, Nest, China Girl, Fulgora, All With All, The Booze Hounds, Colton Wong City, Strong Intention, and Clenched Fist. He also runs Jarvis Booking and Management. John, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, man.
Very, very stoked to be with you. We met, I feel like the first time we met was at Hellfest. I think it was in 2017 when Cryptopsy was doing the Nun So Vile run. I think you were there with Scour. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's jump into the thick of things. I like to start off with a shitty question so we can have fun afterwards. The classic opening question that any person that conducts any interview has been asking throughout the past 2 years. How have you been coping with the glorious years of 2020, 2021, and hopefully not most of 2022?
Well, it's been tough, obviously, and had to get back to a real job recently. So I've been bartending
Really?
in this nice Italian restaurant. But it was the place I used to work 10 years ago before I moved out to Baltimore. So I'm back to an old place I used to work at, which is nice. But yeah, it sucks, obviously not being able to travel over there to Hellfest and all those great festivals. And it's just been a bummer, man. It's been hard to deal with, but what can you do, really? You just got to kind of adapt and try to roll with it.
It's the only thing we can do, and it is a big part of our identity, being out there, not at home. I always enjoyed the yin and yang of my life, of being on tour and then missing being at home, and then being at home and wanting to be on tour. And the first summer of 2020 was nice to be at home because it was the first full summer with no festival tours. As much as I love doing festival tours, it's nice to have a summer where you have no obligations and you can hang out with your family and stuff. But I'm missing it a lot now to get out there, to see my road friends, crew members. I miss all these people.
Yeah, it's a lot of, and that's where you see them. There's people that I remember at Quebec Death Fest.
Yes,
the last one they did, or a couple, maybe it was 2 ago. But there's this guy. He's like, "Hey, I remember you from Hellfest. You were smoking weed out of an apple." And I was like, "I remember smoking weed with you." And it's like it's the only place you see some of these crew guys, and the stage managers, and and they're all great people, of course.
Oh, especially crew members. The very, very quickly do shitty people get weeded out.
Right. Yeah.
You got to be a stand-up human to be a reoccurring crew member for a metal band, because there's not that much money.
Something, and something that large, even like the Maryland Death Fests, like it's the same people every year, because they're the ones that they know what's going on, and they know they can handle the situations, and they could trust these people, even the same security, they got the same security guards every year, and and it's working out, so.
I love that. Good crew members are the best and hard to come by, and you got to be cool. You got to be cool if you want to keep getting hired. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Let's jump into what we're sipping on right now. This is a Vox and Hops Sober February 2022 episode, and I have a very cool friend of mine that sent you something that we could enjoy together. So what are you sipping on right there?
This is the Cryptopsy Nun So Vile, and this is spelled N-U-N. And you can see there's a nun on the and she looks pretty vile. She's holding some hops, it looks like. But yeah, it's delicious. Lavender tea.
Hell yes. Pitch Black North makes the most sinful tea out there, from Calgary, Alberta. Love these guys. I love their socials, just creepy and pushing the envelope all the time. I love it. Teamed up with them back in the fall of 2021 to create this tea, but we also created a beer with a brewery from Calgary as well called New Level Brewing, and they put this tea in the frickin' beer. So that was super fucking cool. We called that Nun So Vile as well. That probably will come back. It seems to be some interest there. So I'm stoked about that. This is awesome. Yeah, so it's a black tea with lavender and hops in it, which of course for me is important. And I love that. So massive cheers to Dominic and Pitch Black North for hooking us up with these. The artwork is done by Tarmouth. It was a cool, it's a little bit less blasphemous than my original idea, but it makes more sense with the Nun So Vile reimagining of the cover art of Nun So Vile. Instead of the head of John, it's a big plate full of hops. It's perfect for Vox and Hops. I love it. Let's jump into the soundtrack of your youth. When you're growing up in your parents' or guardians' house, what music was playing? When you were not in control of the music, what music did your parents or guardians listen to?
Beatles. Beatles, Electric Light Orchestra, Nielsen, a lot, what most considered classic rock, and there's a lot of KC95, which is a local radio station that's still going today.
Really?
And they play, the Aerosmith and, just all the AC/DC and Tom Petty. It's just, that's the type of stuff in the 80s. And there's a lot of MTV growing up too for me. So I was pretty lucky.
That's super sick. That I didn't have cable, but I was babysat at someone's house that did have cable. And Tom Petty is the reason that I wanted to grow up my hair.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember.
His videos were killer, man. They were all really cool.
I think it was the Alice in Wonderland. I think it was like the Mad Hatter. In it,
Don't come around here no more.
I guess, yeah. And he had like shoulder length hair, and I was like, I want to have long hair like him. Why? I don't know why, but it resonated with me.
Yeah.
When I was a young boy.
That was good stuff. Yeah, the album before that, I think, is when I really got into him. I had the Damn the Torpedoes album on vinyl. That was one of the first records I ever purchased myself. Like I have to have this. Really?
And you had a record player that was yours, or you shared family?
My dad had he handed it down to me, a giant record collection. And so when I grew up, I was listening to all this Beatles records, and and I would just kind of go by the album artwork like most kids do. Like, this one looks cool, I want to play it. And yeah, he handed it all down to me. And but then at one point I was like, hey, I need to get Michael Jackson's Thriller. I was like 4, you know, or 5. I was like, gotta have it. And I got the single, got the whole record, and, you know, got the Tom Petty. And like I said,
Could you imagine being Michael back in the day? Let's omit the fact that all the horrible things that happened with him in his life there. But let's think about him pitching that idea to do that Thriller video and how audacious
Right.
that was, you know, and innovative compared
Oh
to
yeah.
what everyone else was doing at the time. To know at that moment that this would be so important in the future of music. Yeah.
And it really was at the time. If you remember it, it was like, it was a big
17 minutes
deal.
long or something.
Yeah, it was as a film basically. And they would
Mhm.
say it's coming on tonight at 8 o'clock, like Saturday night.
Really?
And we would all get together, and I remember being scared to death. Like, this scared the shit out of me, you know? And like, why is Michael Jackson a werewolf? Like, this ain't, you know. But yeah, I remember being scared, and they're like, we're gonna watch it again tomorrow night. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to watch it again. That was scary, you know. But it, you know, I was 4 years old.
Mhm.
But
That's what
yeah, it was
draws
a
us in.
big deal. It was a big deal back then, man.
It's like metal too, being afraid of it and then being drawn closer towards it. Back to the Beatles. Do you think I agree? Do you agree with me? I really think that Helter Skelter was probably one of the first extreme songs to be written.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you gotta, and I think that was a McCartney one.
Mhm.
And yeah, they, you know, if you ask Black Sabbath, who's your favorite band, what influenced you, they're gonna tell you it was the Beatles.
Amazing.
So everyone that's in the metal, you know, they usually say, you know, Black Sabbath's who influenced me. So you got to ask them, and then you ask the Beatles who influenced you, and then, you know, they'll tell you Chuck Berry and
Mhm.
a lot of the rock and roll that came from where I live in St. Louis.
Mm.
So it's kind of very interesting. Rock and roll kind of started here in my area. It came from the blues from south of here, and they would come up to go to Chicago, and they mixed with like these piano players in this area. Obviously, Chuck Berry was one of the originators. But yeah, it all really started here in the St. Louis area.
Did that give you the notion, the idea? Did you feel like it would be possible for you to make it because of that?
No, the first time I thought of that was when I saw Hum on MTV. Do you know the band Hum?
That by
HUM?
name, but I don't think I know it, honestly.
Hum, they had a big hit called Stars, and it was, I'm sure you've heard it once you hear it. And but anyway, they were a big deal in the area. They were from Champaign, Illinois, and wasn't far away. And he kind of had a nerdy look. And I'm like, I remember being like 8 or 9 or whatever it was when I first saw him on MTV, and said, hey, if this guy can get on MTV, I can someday. You know what I mean? That's pretty much what I said. And I've been on there, you know, I've done an interview with them, and so it worked. But yeah, but that band rules. They just put out a record 2 years ago.
Oh, I
It was
did listen to that. Yes, I remember now. Yes.
It's like their first record in 20
Yes.
years.
I think Andrew Garrity was talking about it.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I think if I'm correct on that. Shout out to
Great record.
3-time VOX&HOPS alumni Andrew Garrity. What about your first shows? Do you remember your first live music experience? The first show that you went to go see?
Yeah. Well, the first show I was at, well, really were like bar shows with my uncle's band, but first real one was Ricky Skaggs. You know who Ricky Skaggs is? Country guitar player, amazing guitar player. Now he's playing in the Eagles. I think he kind of took Glenn Fry's kind of spot in the Eagles. But he was playing at Six Flags, you know, and we were just kids, and that was my first like real, like, wow, this is a big deal. There's a lot of people watching, you know what I mean? And look at all this equipment. But really, it was my uncle's band growing up, and that's what did he play? Father. He played drums. Right. He played in a country rock band called Boulder Dash, and they played all the like festivals and like the homecomings, we called them, like a town fair basically. And we would be like the roadies, and when they'd have band practice, we would, you know, be watching during band practice, and they'd take breaks to go out and smoke or whatever, and that's when we'd jump on the drums and the guitars. So that was the first times we ever
you and
up
Adam
instruments.
basically.
Right. Yeah. So we were very, very young. We would play on all of his instruments. They had like a jam room. It was really cool.
Very sick. You beat Adam to becoming a Vox and Hops alumni. We had something set up and it just never panned out back in 2019. So it will happen eventually.
Yeah, get him on there.
He's a big beer nerd, so it's bound to happen.
Yeah.
That's super sick. How about
so yeah, we drink a lot. We used to get beer delivered to our apartment. So they would show up at like a semi truck with cases of Three Floyds beer.
Sick.
On pallets, and they just drop the pallet, drop all the beer, and be like taken off, and just insane amounts of free beer.
Is that because of the collabs that came out with Three Floyds for
that was back then. Yeah. So they part of the deal is I think every time they brewed it, they would have to ship us each a case.
It's amazing.
And sometimes they'd forget and be like, oh no, we owe you like 20 cases, you know.
Three Floyds rules. Todd and Chris, awesome humans. Yeah.
Oh yeah, great beer. Maybe the best I've ever drank.
Let's dance into your first show, your first experience on stage. Do you remember your first show? Was it with Adam? From the jam room to the stage, what steps happened between there?
Well, we had a few different bands, and we were writing our own material about freshman year of high school, sophomore year, and I had a band called Thick, and I saw it was on an cable access channel. It was like Channel 3, and it had this ad. They were looking for musicians to play the 4th of July picnic, and this was 1997. So I went to the meeting. I told them my name, and they were like, "You mean like Paul Jarvis?" So they're my uncle. They were very familiar with my uncle's groups. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's my uncle, you know." And they're like, "Well, when do you want to play?" I was like, "We'll play last," because we're kind of a heavy metal band, and we're all original. And these people, you know, the people at this fair are not going to know us, or you know, it's going to be a disaster. Basically,
we're going to headline. Just make us headline.
Right. And they let us headline.
So,
and they had this whole thing, and they said, well, they asked me if I could play the national anthem on guitar, like Jimi Hendrix. And at the end, they would start the fireworks display. And I was like, cool idea. And they did it, and it worked out. And it was a really good show. And there was a big mosh pit. There was 8,000 people in this place our first show. So it's huge. Wow. But we had about 50 people in front of the stage with big mosh pits, because these were all kids we knew from high school. So my grandma was watching the show, and she thought it was a riot. She didn't realize that this was these people enjoying.
This is a consensual dance.
Right. And at the end of the show, I went and said, "What'd you think, Grandma?" And she's like, "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry they ruined your concert." And you know, and I'm
amazing.
Like, no, they loved it. That means they enjoyed the concert. She didn't understand. It was killer.
That's a high way to start, though. You know, fireworks, 8,000 people, 50 kid mosh pit. You probably went back to school after that, and you were the Kings.
Well, yeah, everyone was like, there was rumors that we signed a record deal. I remember my mom calling me and saying, "Why didn't you tell me you signed a record deal?" I'm like, "Mom, you're going to be the first to know. I have not signed it, you know." And when I did finally sign one, I called her first to say, "Hey, just like I said, now I've signed a record deal." You know,
amazing.
But yeah, that wasn't even the whole story. There was actually, halfway through the set, they stop us because there's a UFO sighting.
No,
the police of multiple cities have called in because there's lasers shooting out of the sky. And this, like, you could look it up online. There's all kinds of reports about it, because it wasn't just a bunch of people that saw it. It was actual police officers calling it in, like, "Hey." And then my dad and sister said they saw it also. So that's when I was like, wow, is this real? But the true story is they stop the set, and some lady gets on stage and starts talking about ice cream, a sale for ice cream, just like on South Park. Do you know how they always do that on South Park? But this was before South Park was even a thing.
Wow.
And I just remember being like, this is weird. Like, why are we stopping? Why is she talking about ice cream? And then she's like, "All right, go back to the set." And we just went back to playing. And that's apparently when a UFO came down. No shit.
Wow. See, you guys are so damn popular, even the aliens wanted to see you.
Right. First show. Pretty crazy.
That's starting at the top. It can only get worse from there.
It's went downhill ever since.
Amazing. This is a sober February episode, so I'd love to talk about your sobriety. You mentioned to me that you've been sober quite a number of years. What does sobriety mean to you?
Well, just being able to, handle myself daily without, I still smoke weed every day, so I'm not 100% sober, but the not drinking it's been 4 years now. And that's really, it's something I had to just come to terms with, that like, I can't handle the hangovers anymore. And it's really that's how I felt the next day, and everything's kind of revolved around drinking for a while. And that's kind of like, so, even going to concerts, and like, it was like, all right, so if I'm going to concert Friday, I know I'm going to get trashed
Saturday
at the concert. Saturday, cancel all plans. So that's kind of how my life went for a while. And it's nice to I don't have to block the next day off, because I know, like, for example, tonight I'm going to the Royal Rumble, the WWE pay-per-view thing tonight.
Sick.
And honestly, 10 years ago, I went to the same thing, and I would probably already start drinking right about now, because I'd be like, time to pregame, and you got to get nice and have a good. But I miss doing that. It was such a good time, but I don't miss the hangovers, and I kind of always took everything a little too far. I think, when I would drink a lot. I would just not stop until I physically couldn't drink anymore, or they just cut the liquors off somehow. And even if they did that, I'd find a way to find some liquor, you know what I mean? So it'd be hard for me to just take a couple drinks, you know what I mean? And just, some people could do that. And I know, my mom's been drinking for years. She's seems to be doing all right. I know a guy that's 90 years old, that drinks a Manhattan every day. And that's just, he goes to the bar where I work, it has a Manhattan, and I'm just like, wow, how do you do it? He's like, I just do one. I'm like, well, I can't do that.
Like
I can't just
opening the floodgates.
It really does. And it would, like, we'd have band practice on like Sundays, and we'd always drink in practice, because it was just part of it, But after practice, I'd have that itch, like, I've already had a couple drinks, now it's time to party, and when, like I said, I always had free liquor available at all times, it seems, because like I said, they would ship it to us for free all the time.
Yes.
When I was living in, I had a nice bar, at my house, and it was pretty much always available. So, if you got nothing to do tomorrow, and I would, have a couple cocktails, but it always keeps going. And that was really my problem. I just drank too much. And since I've been sober, I just obviously feel better every day, but save a lot of money. There's a lot of pros and cons. I do miss the, camaraderie, going out and drinking with the boys, but I'll grab a Bud Zero, and I'll have my vaporizer. I'll get high in the corner. No one has to see that, And that's really what's helped me, is smoking weed.
Did you increase? Because often we replace one vice with another. Sometimes some people if they get sober, they tend to like put on a little weight. Some people, or they become obsessed with working out, because alcoholism, if you take away the alcohol, the ism still stays. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of yo-yoed. You're familiar, like, so like when I quit drinking, I lost a bunch of weight, and I had multiple people.
Massive calorie intake.
Right. So like, I had, even Phil was like, "You're looking skinny. Don't get any skinnier." And I went to Christmas to my mom's. My mom's like, "You look skinny. Like, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I quit drinking. I feel great." And then I go to my dad's Christmas, same day. He says the same thing. I'm like, must be something wrong. Because I feel great. I've just lost a lot of weight really fast from not drinking, I guess. And then, from hearing all this, I'm losing weight. I'm like, well, I better start eating some double cheeseburgers, some bacon on it or some shit, So I kind of got bigger, and now I'm starting to get back on the bike and trying to trim down a little bit. But yeah, so I've went like up and down since I quit drinking.
But your identity as a drinker, like obviously I'm noted, people know me because I'm the craft beer guy, basically. So if eventually I became sober and I go out in the world again, people are still going to have that association. Did people have association with you? I'm going to see John tonight. He's coming through on tour. We're going to party. And then you show up and you're like, oh no, I don't party. I still party, but I don't party like that anymore.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's happened. And like, we played a festival last year, the Full Terror Assault. And I've played that like almost every year with a different band. Like Strong Intention played one year, Fulgora played one year, Clench Fist played one year, and my new band Nest played last year. And a lot of people there, and that's where it's like there's seriously no security, and it's bring your own beer. So I would bring a bar with me basically, and throughout the weekend, I just drink nonstop and just have a blast. And there's plenty of people out there doing the same. So there's no shortage of liquor. And so I've never turned down so many free beers and shots, and like, sorry guys, like, and everyone's cool about it. No one's like, oh man, there's been a couple people who are like, sober Jarvis sucks, man. Like that was Corpse Grinder said that to me one night, he was sober Jarvis sucks. He's giving me shit. But
George has been on the podcast twice, and he always talks about how he's another one that can't stop once he starts. He'll be the last one to go to bed, and he spoke at length about that when he was on the podcast.
Well, it's true. I was lucky enough to be on tour with him for a little while, and it was like a full month of me and him. And I swear, I tried to outdrink him every night. And out of that whole tour, only one night did I make it past. He fell asleep, and I was like, I did it. I outdrank Corpse Grinder. It was not easy. I seen him go for days, and I'm not exaggerating. Wow. Okay. Days. But it was because he was kind of bummed out that he couldn't be with his family. It was like a Thanksgiving, and he missed his family, and he's like, well, I'm just gonna sit here by myself and drink. And but hey, we had fun doing it, that's for sure.
How about bartending? You're bartending now. How is your relationship with that? Are you okay being around alcohol, making drinks for other people? You obviously must be because you're doing it. But
it's kind of difficult because there's times where I'll make like a Negroni, or it's where I'm working at. It's a really fancy, like people are ordering Manhattans and old fashions and drinking expensive wines and stuff. So it ain't beers and shots like I would normally drink. But there's sometimes I'll make a drink and I'm like, "Whew, I'd kind of like to try that. That looks delicious," And so, and it's another example where it's free, and right there I could drink. And the owners and the managers are all really cool. They wouldn't mind if I had a drink here and there, but I drink the Bud Zeros they got 0.0%. They kind of after the shift, everyone's having their after dinner drink or after shift drink. I'll have a Bud Zero with them. It kind of helps you fit in. But yeah, it's been easy for me because I guess it's been 4 years now. It's just like I'm just kind of over it. And I'm 42, man. I'm old. I drank for 20 years, So
you've done it all.
Right. But there's still new drinks and shit. Like there's thing called the Moscow Mule. And like 8 years ago, when I was bartending back then, I didn't know. I'd never heard of a Moscow Mule. What what is that? Apparently it's like vodka with ginger beer. I don't know. I didn't know what it was. And they're like, well, it just became popular a few years ago. I was like, well, it makes sense. I haven't drank for 4 years. That's why I've never heard of it, But yeah, it's a little strange.
How about performing? Going from someone that would be the party dude and then performing inebriated and then that first show sober.
Well, very strange, because usually we'd have almost a bar set up, we'd have a couple drinks beforehand, And I mean, at the Hellfest, I remember when we played with the Agoraphobic Nosebleed at the Hellfest, I just walked out with an actual fifth of whiskey. And I was just drinking straight whiskey. And it was like noon, you know? So yeah, and I've had so many shows like where I was almost falling over from just being wasted. But like I said before, like we do it at practice. So we drink at practice. It's kind of like part of the whole gig. And when I quit drinking at first, it was very strange at band practice because everyone was kind of like, whatever, like John quit drinking. And I didn't try to make a big deal about it, you know, like, guys, I'm quitting drinking and blah, blah, blah.
You can't drink either because I don't need the temptation.
Right. It was just more like, no, thanks. I'm cool. I don't want a beer today. Thanks, but no thanks. So I didn't try to make a big deal about it. But yeah, the first show, it's just kind of like, when you get those pre-show jitters or nerves, it's easy to just have a quick shot and then it kind of get, you know, and yeah, when you don't have that, it is a little different. And I'm not going to say it was easy. It wasn't, but it's because it's once again, it's just part of the scene, man. Like it's when you watch the like vulgar videos growing up, it's just everyone's just drinking like crazy. And I remember being a kid when we'd party and watch that, we'd be like, that's the life. That's what we want to do.
That's it.
Right.
There's no other options.
Right. Yeah.
But nowadays with, you know, people like yourself, James Hetfield, let's say, a lot of prominent metal musicians are very open about their sobriety now. Whereas back in the 90s or late 80s, early 90s, it was more secretive and people really promoted excess as a part of the lifestyle of being an extreme metal person. Whereas now there's like a whole bunch of sober artists to provide a positive role model or to provide a balanced role model of, you know, you can be excess, but you can also be extreme, but sober at the same time for younger musicians that are growing up now.
Right. I agree. And I think even for others like sports related, like you could even say like, for example, the thing I'm going to tonight, the wrestling, the wrestlers back in the 80s and 90s, they were drinking and, you know, doing cocaine out of their minds. You know, you could just look at some of the old footage. They're fucking looking crazy. But apparently none of them drink today. They're back there just playing Nintendo game or they're, you know, whatever, Xbox. And they just don't drink. They, you know, just not part of the scene anymore for them. But yeah, it really doesn't bother me, luckily. Like I actually used to smoke cigarettes a lot, and I got hypnotized to quit smoking cigarettes.
Really?
And it worked.
Interesting.
And it doesn't bother me. People smoke around me. It doesn't trigger me to smoke anymore. And it's all in your head. It's all in your subconscious, really. It's trippy. Yeah, they kind of mellow you out and like they would ask you some weird questions and kind of get into the back of your head, and next thing you know, and you wake up and you're just kind of like, whoa. And I swear,
I don't even need to smoke anymore.
Never. And I went straight to a bar right after that just to kind of test it. And the bartender's just like, why aren't you smoking? I'm like, I just got hypnotized to quit, you know, and it worked. And I didn't think it would work. I was kind of tempted to do it just to prove someone wrong, because they were like, they quit smoking immediately. Like, that don't work. People don't get hypnotized, you know. And I was wrong because it worked.
It's a very metalhead thing to do. To try it over yourself and be like, that's not gonna fucking work. And it did. Right. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. How about advice for people that, you know, if someone's listening to this right now that is also someone that once they start they can't stop, they hate their hangovers, what advice would you give them? What advice do you think you needed to hear?
Well, that's a tough one because I'm no expert on any of it, but it's try to stay hydrated all the time. When you go out, get a water in a like plastic cup or a solo cup or whatever they got, so it feels like you got to drink. Because if you're just standing there with nothing, you kind of feel awkward. because you usually, you got that beer, you kind of got your stance with your beer, you're holding your drink, you're watching the show, unless you're like that, you know what I mean? But yeah, just try to find I do Bud Zero because it's no alcohol in it. Find a 0.0% beer. That way, when everyone else is drinking, you don't feel out of place. But really, it's really about, your own health. Who cares what anyone else thinks about you quitting drinking? It's like, it's worked for me. It's made me feel better. I've saved plenty of money along the way. And, like I mentioned earlier, you don't got to block off the next day for a hangover anymore. So there's so many pros to not drinking. The driving is another thing, man. Don't even get into
that was resonating when you were talking about going to band practice. Everyone's drinking. I was like, how are you getting home safely?
That's the thing that we're risking. We're not being smart, and even if it's, a couple blocks, you shouldn't obviously drink and drive. It's a terrible idea. But after a couple hours of drinking, if you're only drinking a couple, you say to yourself, well, 1 hour is okay, but I'm not drinking Bud Light at band practice. We're drinking the 12%, whatever.
It was a permanent funeral.
Right. We had that. Yeah. Such a good beer, man. That's the thing. I miss that type of beer because it tastes so good.
Massive IPA.
And I drank 2 bottles of it once, which is not recommended.
Yep.
And the room was spinning like I was 16 years old again. I was like, this is not right. I mean, you think I'm got alcohol poisoning or something. But yeah, you don't want to drink too much of that stuff.
How about being in the booze hounds yet you're sober?
Well, that's the
problem.
I'm
gonna give people a little preface as to who the booze hounds are. I discovered the booze hounds when I went on tour with Derek. He's the main dude behind that, and he was playing in Unmerciful back in the day. It was actually my first European tour. And we had a lot of beer one night in Belgium, I believe it was. And we all started singing a Booze Hound song. And there's a video of it somewhere on the internet. But the lyrics are quite profane, so I'm not going to talk about them right now. And they're not acceptable in a social context anymore. But it was lots of fun. So Booze Hounds, how do you feel being sober in the Booze Hounds?
Well, it's going to be difficult at our first show, of course, because there's just beer flowing everywhere. And so, yeah, I'm going to have to get a case or 2 of Bud Zero, because really what we used to do is bring a 30-pack each member onto the stage. And it became like a war show, except, we're shooting beer everywhere. And we're having drinking contests on stage. And the last time we were trying to bring back the pie in the face. You ever see someone take a pie to the face? It's hilarious. And so we're jamming, we're doing it. This guy comes up during the song and he's like, "Are you John Jarvis?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, nice to meet you." And next thing you know, he pie to the face. The guy gets a pie right in the face. And it was just, I was like, this is the greatest band. And we did so many stupid things. Like we ordered a pizza once. I think that was the same show. We started the show with a drummer calling the pizza place saying, "Can you deliver it to the stage, please?" And about halfway through the set, sure enough, the pizza guy comes on stage with our pizza, and we start, having a slice of pizza, and we give the guy a beer, and he takes the beer and leave. The delivery guy leaves with a beer. It was great. But yeah, the Booze Hounds, we did the 99 bottles. You were on.
I was a part of that. Yeah. It was super sick.
Right. So yeah, we came up with that idea years and years ago.
I remember Derek writing me probably in 2013 or 2014, asking me to do it then.
Right. And then, yeah, we compiled a lot of tracks, and then we just got real busy for a while. And then we're just like, we're not going to be able to put this together. This is too big of a night. It's too crazy. Getting 100 different people on the same song. And then right when we're bored during the pandemic, we're like, let's just knock that out. Everyone else is bored like us, so it's the perfect time. And yeah, you were on it. We had so many cool people on that thing. But yeah, it would be nice. We thought about doing a show where we actually play the 99, you know, and see how long that lasts. But yeah, it's going to be strange because the whole show is revolved around drinking. Every song's about drinking. And I usually end up doused with beers, you know, usually my guitar and is just ruined by the end of the show. But it's always fun. It's going to be difficult once we get back on stage though. Cause yeah, we're gonna have to tell the guys, hey, don't pour any beers in my mouth, please.
Pour the non-alcoholic ones in my mouth. That's about it.
Right. Yeah, I could do that. So
interesting. Let's talk about balance. You are in many, 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 many projects. How do you find balance in a way to do that, to be creative in so many projects all at once? How do you find, you know, this riff, this idea works with this band? How do you stay fresh and not just, I'm Adam Jarvis and, you know, all these projects? How do you have an identity in all the projects?
Right. Yeah. You try to not make them all sound the same, I think is the way I try to do it. Like when I started Nest, I was like, well, this got to sound different than everything. It can't sound like Scour. I don't want, you know, at first I didn't even want blast beats because most of my bands have blast beats. But now since then I've wrote some songs with blast beats, but it's really just, there's so many different types of metal, you know, as you know. So I don't love every black metal band and I don't love every hardcore band and I don't love every grindcore band, but I try to take my favorite parts of each, you know. There's parts of death metal I love, of course, almost every part of death metal I love, but it's, you know, it's best to, when I think Fulgore is a good example of, we just tried to take our favorite parts of this genre and favorite parts of this genre and kind of mix it all together, you know. But it's of course my opinion, what's my favorite part of, you know. So I just try to keep it different because that makes it, you know, more interesting.
And how do you find balance, like time wise? How do you do it all? What is your tactic for that? Yeah.
I've been lucky because most of my bands don't tour. It's just mostly weekend festival stuff, fly in for the weekend and go home. And obviously that's takes a lot of bands years to get to that level to where, so I've been really lucky that I've been, you know, Scour when we started Scour, we were like, hopefully in 5 years we could do like Hellfest and all this stuff. Let's like build it up. And honestly, we're still building Scour, you know, we haven't even put out our first full length, you know. You know, so when we got the offer for Hellfest, we're like, holy shit, that was fast. Like we weren't expecting it to happen that quickly. So, you know, I understand, I've been really lucky to be able to do that type of stuff. But when you're not touring constantly, it really gives you time to mix it up. You know, I recorded over the last month a couple different projects, and I'm about to start another one like today and tomorrow for Strong Intention. So it's like, if there's more than one thing going on at once, which is rarely happening, it usually seems to just work out, luckily. Like, you know, but when it's, for example, something like Scour, say we want to get together in like July or something, I got to call up Adam. I got to call up Mark. We got to see if Down's doing shows. We got to see if the Illegals are doing shows. Is Misery Index playing? Because, you know, there's so many questions that got to be answered, you know. So luckily with technology these days, you got the Google Maps and you got, you know, the event pages. And so sometimes I don't even need to ask. I could just go to the Misery Index website and see their events and be like, well, I guess Scour can't do anything around those dates. You know what I mean? And we never be pushy about it, you know, because everyone's got their own projects, you know. So we're not jerks. We're like, Scour's doing this, so you must cancel everything. You know, it's never like that. We always want to work it out.
Do you want to keep those musicians? Say like Misery Index was doing something. Would it ever be like, well, Scour got offered to do this, we'll replace a member for this tour? Is that because Cryptopsy is doing that now with Ollie? Yeah. because he's in
Right.
capital
So,
decapitation now.
right. So that's never been an issue for us, luckily. And if it came to it, we'd probably just say, turn it down,
Okay.
you know?
It's this crew
So,
or this is Scour.
right. That's pretty much the way I look at it. I mean, unless the band member said, "Hey, I'm sick, find a replacement
Yeah.
fast," and I would
Yeah,
do that. Like if I was sick or something, and or if I couldn't do a show,
Mhm.
obviously I'd be like, "I'm going to get someone ready to replace me, and I'll do whatever it takes to help so the show can go on." That's the way I would look at it. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of difficult these days because there's so many different rules everywhere. You know, everyone's got to kind of be on the same page in
Mhm.
bands these days, and I've seen a lot lately there's band members leaving mysteriously out of these bands, and it's like, I wonder what's going on.
Exactly, especially in these modern times with the divisive state of opinions.
Right. You know,
That's all I'll
they're
say about that.
right. Yeah, we can get into a deep conversation if you want, but let's not. How about that?
Vox and Hops dances on on the. We're not going to talk about that line. I'm sure you've spoken about it, but Scour. When you were a kid watching MTV back in the day, did you ever imagine you'd be in a band with Phil Anselmo?
No, but I did have a premonition at a Pantera show once, and he actually called me out of the crowd when I was a kid. I was like in the 10th row, and he's like, "You right there." He's like, "Look around you. That's your family now." And I remember everyone was looking at me, and they're like, "Holy shit, he's talking to you." And everyone was like handing me beers and joints, and like I was just like, "This is crazy. I can't believe the singer Pantera has called me out." And then the next time I saw him, he said something again, and I was like, "That is this guy reading my mind or something?" It was very strange. And I was just kind of like, I almost feel like I'm gonna know this guy someday. As almost like I had the premonition, like it was very strange. But no, I never really thought, obviously, that wouldn't make much sense. You know, I'm watching Pantera, and these guys are gods. They were gods to me, man.
Oh yeah.
Like there was Pantera. Before Pantera, it was Metallica and like Guns N' Roses in the late 80s. Like Motley Crue was really big for me. And then, you know, you listen to Slayer and stuff. But then when Pantera, like when Vulgar came out, I'd already like kind of knew about the hype. But then you go back and listen to Cowboys, and you're just like, man, this band, this is the next Metallica. This is the next big metal band. Who's going to top Pantera? Remember what I was telling my friends, like, this is it. Who's top this? And then, you know, when Far Beyond Driven comes out and it's number one on the charts, it's like, I told you so. You know, these guys are the shit. But, you know, that was a whole different world back then, you know.
When Scour was being built, did you already, was it in like, we're doing this with Phil, or did Phil jump on after?
Well, with the ideas we had, Derek and I were on tour, and we were in San Francisco. We were with Chase Frazier, the original guitar player, and we had known him for years. Yeah, bro. So we known Chase for years from touring with, you know, he was in Decrepit Birth when I first met him, I think.
Yeah, me too.
Or Animosity, actually, when I first met him. But we're sitting in a bar with him, and we're like thinking about, let's start this band. Chase, you want to be in a band? He's like, yeah. And we're like, who can we get in this band to be the frontman? Who do we know that's like, we need a big name, you know, if we're gonna have. And I was like, what about Phil Anselmo? Whatever, they both look like. Do you think he would do it? You know, kind of like, like, let me handle this. I'm gonna send him some tracks. What's it gonna hurt? You know, what worst can happen is that he says no, and we find someone else. So we never had even a second guy thought of.
It's amazing.
We were like, let's ask Phil and see what happens. And he replied almost immediately, said, I could kill this. And we're like,
I was so happy when it was announced, because it's probably the most extreme thing that he's done in a long time.
Right. Yeah. And it goes to show that you can reinvent yourself, you know, like, because he's done similar stuff in the past, you know, but like you said, it compared to like, you know, Down or anything else, it's a whole different thing. You know, it's ripping blast beats, and
Yeah.
it doesn't mess around.
Massive harsh vocals. It was great to hear him come back with massive shape too.
Yeah, and at the time he was recording those, he quit drinking also, and I kind of whipped him into shape, physically. Like he got healthier, and even today he looks better now than he did 7 years ago when he was drinking. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. I love collabs. I make collabs with everything. I put out 35 beer collabs in the past year. I want to ask you to make another beer collab, but I am interested, if you could make a John Jarvis something that you love, what would you do? What would be a sick collab for you? It could be anything.
Shoo, like a baseball card, like a Topps.
That'd be sick.
Set of baseball cards, maybe with like metal. Remember they used to have like metal bands on collectible cards?
That'd be cool. Let's bring that back.
Yeah, someone should do that. And I don't know. I'm a big baseball fan, so anything baseball related.
Should probably play a baseball game once, dude. Bring back that.
Like celebrity softball game, something like that.
And bring back the national anthem with the fireworks.
Right. Great idea. We have Metallica do it. They do a good job with that.
Settled.
Sign them up.
Jarvis Booking and Management. Let's talk about that. When did you start this? Why did you start this? Talk to me about that, please.
I'd say about 6 years ago or so. I was going to my weed dealer's house. Back then, you couldn't get it at the dispensary. So I had to go to my friend's house. And we would always talk. He was in a band also, and he would always pick my mind on stuff. And I was always complaining about this or that, like complaining about my manager, complaining about my booking agent. And he was like, one night, he's like, you know what? You know all this stuff. Why don't you do this yourself? He's like, sounds like you know more than the people that you're paying. So why aren't you doing it yourself and keeping the money? And I was kind of like, you know what? Whatever. I went home that night. I made a Facebook page.
Really?
And then the next day I'm getting hit up by a lot of friends. Like, they're like, hey, I remember you. I want to work with you. And, still weekly, I'll get messages from bands, and I just got to be like, hey, sometimes I'm like, here, I charge a fee because it's like, I can't just work with everybody.
Yeah.
Because if I said yes to every band that messaged me, I wouldn't have time to do anything. I wouldn't be able to be in these other bands because it's really time consuming, because each band wants they have their own ideas, separate what they want to do. And I try to, do what they want. I don't blindly take a band and send them out to Maryland Death Fest and say, would you book this band? The band says, this is what we want to do. Can you make this work? And I try to make it work, So it really just started from me just being upset with the people I was working with and then wanting to do it myself. Because there was a lot of times I was ended up doing a lot of the work myself, because when you're on the road, if you don't have a tour manager with you, someone in the band's got to step up. Someone's got to get paid. Someone's got to make sure we got bottles of water, someone's got to make sure we're at set times or at the load in on time, And a lot of times it was just by default me having to do it, And so, and that really came from touring with bands like Misery Index early on, that guys like Sparky would be like teaching me along the way. He's like, I'm going to teach you how to be a tour manager. This is what a tour manager does. You got to go talk to that lady and tell her to pay you at the end of the night, don't let her run off, because she might try.
It's happened. Yes.
It happens.
You might have to drive her to the ATM.
Yeah. And he has done that. There's stories where they have like kidnapped promoters and said, there's the ATM. You're getting the money. Like,
no, you can't send me a transfer.
Right. And back then when they were first touring, like they didn't have cell phones and like didn't have Google Maps or even MapQuest. They were like, would drive to the city, find a payphone, call the promoter and be like, all right, we're at this payphone by the Burger King.
Wow.
Where do we go from here to get to the venue? Like that's what it kind of had to be like back then.
Amazing. So bands hit you up all the time. You basically choose who you want to work with. What is the big thing? What would you love? Is there an artist that you would love to work with, to book, to manage?
Yes, I've never really reached out to any bands and been like, hey, I want to book you. But there's some bands that are broke up that I wish would reunite that I've reached out to, and it wouldn't really, to a lot of people, wouldn't really be a big deal, but to me it would, because these are some of my favorite bands. And sometimes they reply and they're like, you know what, we might do something, and if we do, we'll get back to you. But there's bands that I love, like bands like Quicksand, and I'd really like to get involved with bands like that, and Glassjaw, that are still touring, and just because I'm just big fans of their music.
And then you could so you're reaching out to them basically like, you guys reform and I'll get you booked in all these festivals, basically. Right.
Well, and that's happened with, do you remember Enemy Soil?
The name sounds familiar, yeah.
So Enemy Soil was the band before Agoraphobic. And so Agoraphobic came before Pig Destroyer. And before Agoraphobic, I believe Rich was in Enemy Soil with JR from Pig Destroyer. So Enemy Soil was one of the first grind bands in the area over there. So kind of had like a legendary cult following, over the years. And a few years back, they decided that we're going to reunite, and they hit me up, and like, see what we can get. And so I got a few festivals for them where they were getting like some big money. Like for them, they said they never got paid anything in the past.
Yeah.
So when I'm hitting them up with like $5,000 offers, they're like, yes, let's do it. And then like the bass player like backed out, and the next thing you know, now I'm playing bass in the band, because I'm like, the show must go on. We booked these killer shows, and so I ended up playing bass in like 4 or 5 different fests with that band. But it was just they reunited, and then there were some other big festivals hitting them up trying to book, and they're like, nah, we're done. We decided we're done. So
just smart to do too, and then they'll come back with bigger offers hypothetically in the future years.
Right. Yeah, because when you break up, that's the second, they want you to reunite, but it's gonna cost you.
One last question. I typically wrap up with a hangover cure, but we won't go there. I would like to hear what the silver lining of the pandemic has been for you, the best part of COVID.
Oh shit. I guess not feeling guilty about staying home a lot, because I have a lot of like great entertainment at my house. I got all the video game systems, and I got a recording studio. I got a keyboard if I want to play it. I got my guitars. So it's hard for me to get bored at home, because there's so much going on, and like you said, when you're on the road and stuff, you kind of miss, I miss my TV show Sunday. It's like, fuck, I can't get online because it's going to ruin my show, the spoilers. And remember like Game of Thrones. It was like, I'm not going to be able to get online, because back then I used to have to download an episode to my laptop and then watch it like on the bus, and with your headphones, and like, everyone shut up, leave me alone for an hour.
I had to wait to watch with my wife, which is worse, but Ollie was watching it. And there was a specific episode in the last season. I can't remember which episode it was, but he was playing the show and he's like, dude, I just keep thinking about this episode.
Right.
Yeah. Crazy. So now you get to stay home and you don't feel guilty when all your friends come through town and they're playing.
Well, the thing is, I've been trying to make as many shows as possible. That hasn't been something that I've actually spent more money on concerts in the last couple of years. And, but when you go and then you're told like, don't go backstage, like no backstage hangs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Which is the modern era of touring right now. Yeah.
Right. So example was, I was a friend's +1 for a show, and obviously you want to thank the band. Thanks for getting me on the guest list. What's up? Great show, whatever. But you're told like no backstage hangs. You can't go back. And then a week later, like, why didn't you come backstage? It's like, whoa, I was told not to go backstage. Like, what is it? So now I'm the bad guy because I didn't go backstage. I'm so confused. Maybe I should have just stayed home. But it's very strange, because I used to not be afraid to ask to get on a guest list. You know what I mean? Because I was always broke. Slayer comes through town. If it's $75, I'm like, well, if I can get it for free, why don't I get it for free? You know what I mean? But it's these days, it's more like time to pay for the ticket, for a little while.
It is a strange time for touring. And I don't know if people know this that are listening, but bands that are touring right now are basically isolating to themselves.
Right.
And there's no bus hangs happening. There's no bandwagon parties. Bands are touring and they're staying by themselves a lot, or with the touring package, I imagine. So it's very different. So even when we do get to go back on tour, it won't be what we remember it being.
Right. Yeah. You kind of, if you're smart, you got to stay in a bubble. And even these giant acts that are touring, like Elton John, for example, I mean, his tour has been going for 2 days and then he's got COVID.
Boom. Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
It's like, so, I mean, I don't know about you. I've had it. I've been through it. I've got vaxxed. I've boosted. I got so many antibodies. I got like a 1 in 100 chance of getting it again, but you still got to play it smart, man. Because apparently you can get it over and over. So
it's never ending.
So right. It sucks, man. But the show must go on. So
the show, it's art. Art it makes us feel good. It's important. John, thank you so much hanging out with me, talking about your life, music, talking about being sober. I really, really appreciate you being so open and taking the time to hang with me. Massive, massive cheers to you.
Right on, man. Thank you. Cheers.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. Man, did I ever have a blast finally connecting with John. We've been trying to have a conversation for quite some time, and I'm very, very stoked that we did. For Sober February, what an amazing conversation. John, thank you so much for sharing your story of sobriety, your journey towards a healthier lifestyle, your message about saying goodbye to hangovers for good. It was a great conversation. I laughed. I really, really can't wait to hang out with you again in person, to continue this conversation, and to laugh some more. So massive cheers to you, John. I'm stoked to hang out again. If you enjoyed this Vox and Hops episode, you should sign up to the Vox and Hops Metal Podcasts mailing list. You could do that on my website, voxandhops.com. That's VOXandHOPS.com. And when you do that, you shall receive 1 email a week containing all of the details of everything that has happened throughout the past week in the world of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, including any details for any episodes which I dropped throughout that past week, if I've been a guest on someone else's podcast, as well as any information for any projects that I have in the works. Before I announce them to the public, you'll also get to see the album reviews which the Vox and Hops album review crew have dropped throughout that past week, and you'll get to see which albums Jerry Monk, the metal architect himself, has added to the Brutal Awakenings playlist, which is the best playlist if you're looking for new music, because Jerry just has a golden ear and puts all of the best stuff on that playlist. It's available on both Apple Music and Spotify, and trust me, you want to check this out. So do me a favor, please. Sign up to the Vox and Hops Metal Podcasts mailing list. There's just so much going on. I would hate for you to miss a single thing, so sign up to the mailing list. The Vox and Hops Metal Podcast is brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts. I hope you have a glorious weekend. I will be back next week with 2 more episodes, one on Tuesday and another on Friday, the final 2 episodes of Vox and Hops Sober February 2022, which is presented by Pitch Black North, the Satanic Tea Company. But until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.